All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We are opening up the ultimate case file today. I want you to step into the shoes of a forensic fraud examiner with me, because we're going to completely deconstruct the actual crime scene of the 1920 Securities Exchange Company. This was an operation so notoriously deceptive that it literally gave its name to an entire category of financial fraud. We'll be looking at exactly how the mechanics of this scheme functioned, also you can learn how to spot the modern red flags that fraudsters are still using out there today.
I mean, just listen to the sheer audacity in this direct quote from the man himself, Charles Ponzi. Even after orchestrating a catastrophic financial collapse, he viewed the whole thing as a grand performance, a show that was easily worth the $15 million he swindled from innocent people. It just perfectly establishes the mindset of a highly charismatic predator who absolutely thrives on manipulation.
So here is our investigation docket for today. We're breaking this down methodically. First, opening the Ponzi file. Second, anatomy of the arbitrage. Third, when the math fails. Fourth, profiling the financial predator. And finally, spotting modern red flags.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, opening the Ponzi file, a 1920 crime scene. We really need to look at the man at the center of it all.
Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Tebaldo Ponzi, obviously better known to us as Charles Ponzi, was an Italian immigrant who arrived in America in 1903. He had empty pockets, sure, but a head absolutely full of schemes. Before the guy ever pitched a single investment in Boston, a quick forensic background check reveals a really telling rap sheet. In 1908, he served time in Canada for a Montreal bank forgery. Then, in 1910, he was sent to an Atlanta federal penitentiary for smuggling illegal aliens into the U.S. So the crucial point to remember here is that by the time he founded his Securities Exchange Company in 1919, we are already looking at a predator who was incredibly comfortable operating completely outside the law and spinning elaborate fictions.
Moving right along to Section 2, Anatomy of the Arbitrage, the legal loophole. This is where we examine the maneuver that actually made the whole scam seem plausible.
You see, Ponzi masked his fraud behind a seemingly brilliant and perfectly legal financial maneuver known as arbitrage. It sounds complex, but arbitrage simply means taking advantage of a price difference between two or more markets to strike a profit. Ponzi claimed he was exploiting post-World War I currency fluctuations by trading international reply coupons, or ARCs. Now, these were real, legitimate coupons established by the Universal Postal Union. You'd enclose them in letters so a recipient in another country could exchange them for return postage stamps.
When you methodically outline his pitch, you can see exactly why investors bought in so fast. It made total logical sense. Here's how he sold it. Step 1. You take a strong US dollar, send it to a relative in Italy, and exchange it for heavily depreciated Italian lira. With that lira, you could buy 66 of these postal reply coupons. Step 2. You ship those coupons right back to America. Step 3. Because international treaties dictated a set exchange value, you could take those 66 coupons to a U.S. post office and redeem them for $3.30 worth of American stamps. You buy cheap overseas, you redeem high in the U.S. Boom.
According to his public ledger, the math was just wild. If he had $3.30 in stamps, he claimed he could sell those stamps at a 10% discount to large businesses, which left him with $3 in cold hard cash. Subtract the initial $1 investment and the $0.50 he promised to pay the investor in interest, and he is still left with $1.50 for overhead and pure profit. This perfectly structured math showed a mind-boggling 230% profit margin. It looked like a foolproof, bomb-proof money printing machine.
And to put that into perspective, this really illustrates the irresistible lure he dangled right in front of working-class people. At the time, conservative, traditional banks were offering a 5% annual return. Give them $100, wait a whole year, and you got back $105. Ponzi's Securities Exchange Company? They were guaranteeing a staggering 50% return in just 45 days. No way, right? The contrast was so extreme that people literally began withdrawing their life savings and mortgaging their homes just to hand this guy cash.
But let's hit Section 3. When the math fails, the illusion crumbles. As any good fraud examiner knows, the truth always lives in the logistics.
$160 million. By July 1920, Ponzi was taking in $250,000 a day. His office was literally cluttered with cash. Clerks were throwing money into trash bins because they couldn't count it fast enough. But here's the catch. To actually pay off the millions of dollars pouring in based on his arbitrage model, Ponzi would have physically needed to buy, transport across the ocean, and process 160 million reply coupons.
However, the stark, forensic reality of the crime scene was this number: 27,000. Yeah, you heard that right. There were only about 27,000 of these coupons in circulation in the entire world. The logistics of his business were a total physical impossibility. He wasn't buying coupons at all. He was simply taking the money from new investors and handing it directly to the old investors, skimming millions off the top to buy mansions and luxury cars for himself.
The scam was finally blown wide open by financial journalist Clarence Barron, the founder of Barron's magazine and owner of the Wall Street Journal. He published this devastating investigative exposé in the Boston Post. Barron systematically dismantled the mechanics. He pointed out that countries like France and Spain had already left the postal system entirely, and the U.S. Post Office limited redemptions to just 10 coupons at a time. But here is the ultimate red flag Barron hit the nail on the head with. If Charles Ponzi could truly double his money every 45 days, why on earth was he keeping millions of dollars of his own personal cash sitting in a standard 5% regional bank account? The logic completely fell under a magnifying glass.
This brings us to Section 4, Profiling the Financial Predator, the human element. Because to truly understand why people fell for this, we have to look past the ledgers and examine the psychological profile of the victims themselves.
We need to talk about a concept called financial mediation. Basically, it means entrusting your capital to an intermediary based heavily on faith in their perceived superior market knowledge. Ponzi was an absolute master at cultivating this. He projected an aura of supreme confidence and respectable success. He relied entirely on his victims' lack of deep financial literacy, substituting their critical thinking with absolute, unwavering trust in his charismatic front.
And this triggers a fascinating psychological exploitation. When Ponzi paid out those massive 50% returns to his very first wave of investors, he manufactured intense FOMO, fear of missing out. Those early adopters ran straight to their families and friends, triggering what behavioral scientists call familial bias, where you trust an investment simply because your brother or your neighbor trusts it. It created a powerful, completely false social proof. Suddenly, it felt like a foolish mistake not to invest. He weaponized human greed and community trust to build his pyramid.
The timeline of the collapse was incredibly fast and utterly devastating. By June of 1920, $2.5 million was invested. By July, he was raking in $250K daily. But on July 25th, Barron's exposé dropped, triggering a massive bank run. Get this, Ponzi actually tried to calm the panicked crowds by handing out donuts and coffee outside his office. But the cash register emptied quick. By August 9th, state bank commissioners froze his accounts. And by August 12th, the man who promised endless wealth was arrested. Thousands of people lost absolutely everything, getting back pennies on the dollar if they got anything at all.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 5, Spotting Modern Red Flags, the Actionable Debrief. How do we actually take the lessons from a 1920s postage stamp scam and apply them to today's incredibly complex financial world?
Okay, let's get into the weeds here. If someone pitches you an investment, always ask this forensic question first. Is the investment registered, and can you access the detailed paperwork? Legitimate opportunities are registered with regulatory bodies like the SEC. They provide very clear prospectuses. Fraudsters, they rely on secrecy, unregistered securities, and proprietary strategies that they claim are just, way too complex for you to understand.
And that brings us to the ultimate red flag checklist for modern investors. Because whether it is Charles Ponzi in 1920, Bernie Madoff in 2008, or some modern scammer pitching a phantom crypto exchange right now, the architecture of the fraud is identical. Watch out for unsustainably high returns coupled with promises of low risk. Real markets fluctuate, guys. If a return is consistently high regardless of the market, be highly suspicious. Watch out for overly complex strategies, a lack of access to paperwork, and the absolute second you experience unexplained difficulties withdrawing your money, the alarm bells should be deafening.
As we close the Ponzi file today, I want to leave you with one final, vital question to really ask yourself. Are you truly immune to the alluring combination of a charismatic pitch and the promise of easy money? Because honestly, the most dangerous assumption any investor can make is believing they are simply too smart to be fooled by a modern Ponzi. Stay vigilant, always demand the paperwork, and remember, if it looks too good to be true, it almost certainly is. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep your investigative eyes open out there.